Hey man, it's Kite707 here. Today, I wish to talk about comics and how to make them more engaging, whether in paneling, introduction, or engagement. So your comics don't end up like a boring ass boomer comic or, the dog shit comics that you used to make as a 10-year-old or a 14-year-old edgelord. In this section of the video, I'll be discussing panel layouts and why it's so important to know the basics and how to use them. So, a panel in definition is a picture that connects to the previous picture of a story and the consecutive picture in a sequential storytelling format. Treat panels like a few sentences of description, say in like a storybook, or a scene sequence in a film. Using panels to illustrate scenes for a comic, animation, or film would be called a storyboard sequence, which is made to illustrate certain scenes that would fit the narrative that they want to show. Think of storyboards as a planner or rough panel for a few scenes. The thing that comics and storyboards often differ from is that comics are a finished product, whereas the storyboards are often only used to plan. Comics also have differing panel layouts, whereas storyboards have an unchanging layout for paneling. The panel layout for a comic affects the intended mood for it a whole lot. Say for example, if you use very erratic paneling for a story that's, say, about a test writer who writes about apple trees sitting in a boring office space, well, it probably won't fit like all that well because there isn't really a whole lot of movement. On the opposite end, that's like using very linear and relaxed boxes or panels for comics when there's like a vicious sword fight and there's a dangerous monster or a gunfight. The panel layouts need to add to the factor of suspense, or the fights just won't really feel all that engaging enough. An example of good fitting panel layout would be a fight from Invincible, Mark Grayson vs. Conquest. The paneling is not sturdy at all. It's not intended to be, since it's a very gory fight with a whole lot of trouble at stake. Although this rule isn't really exclusive to dramatic fights in comics or manga. For example, we can take examples of dialogue and how the flow of the paneling changes, and how each panel is either smaller or bigger when it comes to important dialogue. For example, a scene in one of my comics, Ninja Pickle, where two of my characters are talking on a phone. I decided to shrink and cut the shapes out for the panels in different ways to add dramas. If I decided to make the panels evenly shaped, it would appear really boring as there won't be a whole lot of intensity to it. Another thing with making your panels look better is to never just divide the fucking paper, like how I did with my old comic. Instead, make sure there's space for each panel. So, in summary, make sure to do all three of these things for the panel layouts. Treat each panel like a specific shot for a movie, or a small line of text in a book describing a scene. Make sure to add space for individual panels, and pay attention for margin lines if you're scanning traditionally. As well as also make your panel layouts adjusted to the mood of the story and flow. Now you understand the basics of panel layouts, right? Okay, so before I get to this section, I would like to say that many art styles can fit in with comics, as the term art style is really just based on the preferences and choices that an artist makes for what he or she would want for their work. So if you strongly lean to a certain art style or a way of drawing your comics, I would recommend you go ahead with it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and say this. Art is the most important thing when regarding the creation of your comics, because you sit your fat ass down, maybe drink some Monster Energy drinks, and then have Dorito dust on your fingers, and then you probably draw some comics or something. If you choose not to draw, you might probably choose to write or be an editor for a comic, but this is really the art section, so it should be self-explanatory on what I'm going to be talking about here. Anyway, sorry for the dumbass yapping that I produced. So back to what I was saying about art choices. Oh yeah, they're very important when you're making comics and all. In the older days of comics, most of the artwork was simple, as comics were intended to be for mass viewership of visual storytelling. and most of the artwork was supposed to be similar to caricature-based artworks with exaggerated features. In terms of newspaper comics or cartoons, those were just short and small strips intended to be read by the sweet, everyday NPC to get a good laugh out of life. But then there would be an emergence of superhero-based comics, which would be like the building block for an entire industry of comics. Regardless, during the very early days of comic production, art was still simplistic since it was intended to be mass-produced and looked at by the average eye during those times. And it was also mostly intended for mass production in newspapers rather than being like a niche thing like it is around today. But right now, it's a lot more acceptable to try out newer art styles and more different art styles for your comics based on what it's meant for. I'd also like to talk more about deciding on your art choices for your comic. When it comes to your artistic choices and the way you wish to draw your panels out, you might want to consider what medium you're using, whether it be digital or traditional, and what art choices are you going to be planning to make for your work. The most common type of traditional medium used for comics is, well, pen and ink, either monochrome or with colors, which would be watercolor-based mediums, colored pencils, or alcohol markers, and what your intended focus is for art. Digital mediums are quite similar, although you can have far more flexibility with the way you draw and paint your panels and pictures. For example, you can easily use a charcoal-based brush, and it would not be screwed up in the scanner as it would be as the drawing would be saved as an image. Same thing if you intend to have like an oil-based painting art style, so you can basically get a pass when you make comic panels out in a different art style compared to traditional mediums, which aren't processed to scan crayons, pastel, and charcoal-based mediums. So, you can make whatever art choice you want for your comics, but only if you have or know 3 of these things. For the first one is intended purpose for your art choices, whether it be minimalist for easier storytelling, or highly detailed to bring philosophical thought or admiration for the artwork. Or if you're planning to add a mix of art choices in certain different styles for panels and how you would manage them. For example, if you intend to have a memorable quote or a dramatic speech, do you want your stick figure as art terrain, or do you want to make it detailed to add drama? Know that art plays a role in your panels. The second one is, well, understanding your foundations in art and your overall experiences with the basics of understanding two-dimensional artworks in whatever medium you decide to make or draw with, whether it be anatomical knowledge of point-based perspective, or understanding how light works. The third one is deadlines and when you wish to set them, and if you can get your work done by your deadlines. The most common types of deadlines and releases by artists are usually weekly releases, which are usually a few pages long, or monthly releases with more content but more time to make the pages. You must ask yourself, with my art choices, is it possible for me to get this done in a certain amount of time? And if you're fine with say going past your deadlines for the quality of your work. You do not want to overwork yourself with your choices, as that leads to a lack of motivation. And on the other side, don't slack off. That kills your motivation as well. Art matters a lot more than you think it does. The quality, the medium-based choices, and also the art affecting deadlines. Keep that in mind, Mr. Newbie. Okay, so you're a good artist, and you know how the panels work now, don't you? So what are you gonna do with the plot right now? So if you want to make your first comic, first engaging comic, you want to be concise with the plot as much as possible. For the first step, go to this secret link called docs.google.com. For the second step, you click the plus sign or blank document. For the third step, you want to create a title for the document. For example, I'm going to title mine as Anal Glands. Okay, so for naming your story, you either want it to grasp the main idea of a story, or if you're kind of clueless on the name, then name it after your main character, like I did for one of my projects called Ninja Pickle. But for this, I would advise that you don't like keep a very complicated name for your character. To make your process as simplistic as possible, you would want to have a mere skeleton of a plot to show and understand your concept with ease. Like for my older projects, I've made skeletal plots with mere bullet points to explain every event with ease. Now, once you have the basic ideas for creating a comic yourself, how do you showcase them? Easy. You plan out a thumbnail sketch plan or improvise the panels depending on the scene that you're trying to get in each page or panel. I would honestly say the most important parts of engagements for comics are definitely the first page and the cover of the book, of course. Nice cover design allows people to be attracted to the book before reading it. And if the first page isn't all that good, the engagement eventually tapers off. After you riz them up with your first page, you still want to keep them with you. And you want your first page to be a defining part of the comic book in terms of theme. Whether it's a slice of life fast food manga or a serious action comic, you want the engagement to still be in there. And you want consistency with the certain theme or themes dealt with in the comic. Whether it be the lighthearted jokes, the intensifying drama, or even the clever Easter eggs in the visuals. Make sure something is at least consistent, or your dad's gonna go get milk. My friends here were very nice and honorable to give their thoughts on my older and newer works. They emphasized the quality of my artwork being a strong reason and why they liked the newer one over the older one, despite my newer one being a draft. So which one did you actually feel was better in quality? Like my older shit?
The newer,
of
course.
Yeah, and why do you feel like my newer one is better?
I think the dialogue's gotten better, and
Alright.
also the art style is like it's much more like defined, like better shading.
I mean, is it
like
easier to read despite this being
Yeah.
a draft? I mean, you guys are already enjoying it. Whereas, like, you
I
know,
am very much enjoying it. Yes.
yeah, thank you. But like, do you like feel like there's any like difference between like my older stuff and my newer stuff? Like, I mean, I use
sure.
a similar materials. Like, I actually use printer paper for this because I didn't even care about this.
So I can tell that like it's made by you, like between your older and newer.
Yeah.
But like it's definitely like I can see the development.
Yeah, but do you like feel like there's any change in the panels and stuff?
Changes in the panels. I would actually say that that's something that's like maintained like pretty consistent.
I think the
really?
image quality, the drawing is better.
The
Yeah.
drawing is better,
It's
but like
more
I would say the
detailed.
panel styles are pretty similar.
Yeah.
So
Like
which
maybe
one?
a suggestion is like maybe like experiment with like the types of panels.
Oh, yeah, I
like
got it.
rather than like just like this exact format.
So do you guys feel like this one would be sold more than like my older one?
Oh, of course,
Yeah.
of course.
Like, do you think like more people could read this one compared to this one? Because this looks like a child's like bullshit comic.
True.
You just
My friends have stated that they find the panel system from my newer and older ones to be similar. Although for my newer ones, I intended for it to have some sort of variation by making each of the panels separated from each other and make it less cropped by the scanners. And treat the images like they're like a specific scene in a script. From what they said, they seem to have liked the artwork much better in my newer one and felt like my dialogue had an improvement to it. But they felt that my artwork would be a good selling point for my comic along with the dialogue compared to, well, my older stuff. So, to make more interesting comics, make sure to construct good dialogue and present your plot well. And keep in mind that what you want for your art choices and if these art choices will do well for you. The truth is, art is usually the most time-consuming and most expensive process when it comes to creating comics. Sorry if this video took me a while to get out. I was busy with a bunch of things, and I'm also a lazy fuck, so please mind. If you like this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. I would love it so much if you guys would be kind enough to follow me on my socials and join me on my Discord server. Lastly, share the video as it helps me a lot with more views. Thanks for watching, y'all.